Hello, I'm Professor Kate Bird, and I'd like to introduce this episode of the Power Shift Decolonising Development. In today's session, I'm speaking to Nancy Kankam Kusi from WACSI, the West African Civil Society Institute, and I'm joined with my co-host, Dr. Nompilo Ndlovu. So in today's session, Nancy talks about WACSI and their work on strengthening civil society in West Africa and beyond, including their work with the Decolonising Advisory Community, which is a newly launched platform, and with RINGO, the Reimagining INGO group. There are strong messages from this episode on leading from the majority world, on claiming space and building a decolonised development sector based on majority world visions and capacities. And I think this episode partners well with the session by Kate Newman from INTRAC, which is episode 27 on decolonised consultancy, and also with Mavis Owusu-Gyamfi's episode, which is episode 20, and Mavis is from Asset in Ghana. And she talks about Africa-led think tank, Africa-led partnership. So listen on for more. Welcome to the Power Shift Decolonising Development, the podcast series seeking to bring together thinkers, practitioners, and activists to share ideas, inspire change, and identify tools for practical action. I'm Professor Kate Bird, a socioeconomist and director of the Development Hub. Today's co-host is Dr. Nompilo Ndlovu. Over to you, Nompilo.
I am Dr. Nompilo Ndlovu. I am a Zimbabwean living and working in South Africa. I'm an oral historian who applies gender frameworks to my work with communities in Africa. Recent work has included involvement in a mixed method study on poverty dynamics in Zimbabwe, where I led the work on gender and marginalization. My PhD focused on mass violence, memory, and local transitional justice in post-colonial Zimbabwe. Back to you, Kate.
Thanks, Nompilo. So today we're very excited to be talking to Nancy Kankam Kusi, a program officer of knowledge management at the West African Civil Society Institute in Ghana. Nancy also leads a diverse team of civil society actors to initiate and implement international development programs that promote community philanthropy, shifting power and resources to the grassroots, localising and decolonising development initiatives in the Global South. She's a member also of the RINGO Project and the initiator of Decolonising Advisory Community. For more on Nancy and the work of WACSI, please click on the show notes below this episode. Now, Nancy, I'm very interested to hear about WACSI and the role that WACSI is playing in civil society in Ghana and beyond. Can you tell us more about that?
Yes, sure. Thank you very much, Kate. And it's nice to be on this platform to have this conversation with you and your audience. So about WACSI. WACSI is a capacity strengthening institute. Like you said, we are based in Ghana and we started operating in 2007. Our work is basically to strengthening the sector in West Africa and also beyond by looking at the structures, the systems, the environments, the resources, including capacities that the sector needs to be able to thrive and do their work. So our role is more of playing a facilitating role, connecting and coordination role where we work with both organic and inorganic civil societies to give them institutional capacities, the technical skills, and technological skills that they need to do their work. We are also very interested in building knowledge capacities and repository of knowledge on civil society and the work that civil society does in the sector. And most importantly, we are very keen in influencing and advocating for an enabled environment for the global civil society work. So that's what WACSI does, and that's the role that we play in the civil society sector.
Thank you so much for explaining that. Could you tell me, do you work beyond Ghana or are you focused simply in Ghana?
So we work beyond Ghana. Like our name is West Africa. So our primary target is West Africa Civil Society Organization. But because of the scope of the work that we do, we go beyond West Africa and look at the entire sector.
Thank you so much. And I know that WACSI's been working on the decolonisation agenda for some time. Can you tell us a little bit more about WACSI's work in this area?
Yes. Yes, so under our work around advocacy, influencing, and seeking for an enabling environment of the civil society, the work on decolonization and its other related issues like localization, shifts the power, civic space really stands out for us, and we focus more on these areas. So we work in this field in several angles. So one aspect is we do a lot of research, knowledge sharing around the field of decolonization to build more knowledge on the issue and also to build capacities of people who want to know more about decolonization and what we do. So we've had key research work. One of our research publications that we've published is on decolonization of aid, where we are looking at the perspective from Francophone sector. So we're looking at what does Francophone civil society organizations see decolonization to be like. We've had other publications around localization, decolonization, shifts the power, these three issues in West Africa, and what does it mean to civil society. So we've had a lot of research around these areas, including the research that we do around this topic under the RINGO initiative. So we build a lot of knowledge on decolonization and to promote the decolonization agenda. Then we also spearhead a lot of conversations, having difficult conversations about the subject matter, because this is an emerging issue that requires a lot of conversations with different actors. So we have webinars, we have conferences and knowledge sharing platforms where we speak more about the topic, we speak more about the issue, and how do we navigate through that and how do we work around that. So recently, one of our novel initiatives under our work on decolonization agenda, which is we see it as a bigger umbrella for our enabling environment work for shifting power, is the work on the Decolonizing Advisory Community, which came out of the RINGO project that we are doing.
Great, thank you so much. I'll pass over to Nompilo for the next question.
Okay, I am pleased you've already started speaking to it, but expanding on your last point, could you tell us more about the Decolonizing Advisory Committee, which was launched in January this year? What is it and what do you hope to achieve?
Okay, so the Decolonizing Advisory Community, so the name is a community that we are trying to set up or to create. The idea, like I said early on, came out of the first phase of the RINGO project, where we were looking at finding innovations, alternative and solutions to different ways that we can work for an equitable sector that we hope to achieve. So it was one of the innovation. The idea originally came from the executive director of Peace Direct, Dylan Matthew. He brought up this initiative on the need for us to create an advisory community of experts, advisors on decolonization. And it came out on the need for us to respond to some of the issues that have been coming up in regarding to decolonization agenda in the aspect of paradigm shift around colonial and traditional way of doing development in the areas of capacity where knowledge is, and the imbalance in the sector of who has knowledge and who can give knowledge to who in the sector. So a number of INGOs were known to have been interested to really decolonize their practices and work. They were very keen on going through this journey to decolonize the work. But what we find out was that most of them were finding it difficult or were struggling to know who to start with, how to start, who to talk to. And they were navigating these challenges within themselves, also within the northern civil society sector. The Decolonizing Advisory Community tries to create the platform to let the sector knows that there is knowledge, there is expertise, there is a lot of capacity in the South that can support us in this decolonization journey. That can be a hand-holding journey for INGOs who want to go through this route of decolonizing their practices. So we are creating a community of advice. We are creating a community of, I would say, consultants, a community of experts, a community of people with knowledge, with capacity, who are in the South or have lived experience of how the South work and work with local national organizations. and are available to provide these kind of services to organizations, to INGOs, to funders who are struggling to journey through this, or who are available and looking for consultant services and looking for support services and looking for advisory services to be able to decolonize their practices and policies. So it's just a community that we are building. And not just building the community. As a community, we are very interested in shared learning and also supporting ourselves. So there is also that platform for you to join the community and have the opportunity to connect with other advisors, other consultants in other parts of the world to create a space of peer learning, shared learning, and then we will have the opportunity to build our own capacity in this domain. So together we are going to help in decolonizing the work. So it's a collaborative space, it's a peer learning space, it's a space of a community of advisors, consultants, but it's also a space for INGOs to find a refuge, to find solutions, to find an avenue for them to connect with advisors, to know who to reach out to, and to help get support to decolonize their work. So that's what we've created. And we've set up this platform to be the working space for us to engage. So you can visit decolonising-advisory-platform.net and join as a member, and let's use that space to build a community for us to decolonize the work that we are doing.
Okay, I can see you're quite passionate about this. And I hope it's growing in traction. Can I just ask an additional question on the community? Am I correct in assuming that it's a community in the global south? You kept saying it's a community in the south, or it's quite global. So far, your community, in terms of shifting the power dynamics, has people representing all different parts of the world?
Yes, so it's a global community, but we are more interested in Southern X to join the community. Yes, but the community is a global community.
Okay. No, that's fine. Thank you for clarifying it. I kept hearing you Southern experts, so I wondered if it was open or it was actually quite an inclusive space. Okay, all righty. Nancy, you have highlighted that WACSI is a member of RINGO, Reimagining International NGO. Can you tell us a bit about that initiative? Because I see WACSI is doing several things simultaneously.
Yes. Okay, so RINGO is one of the bigger umbrella initiatives that we are doing that came up with a number of innovations. Like I mentioned, the Decolonising Advisory Community is a member of it. So it's basically a system change initiative that we started somewhere in 2021 with a group of experts and advisors across the world. And the idea is that we are using this initiative to transform the global civil society. And the focus is on the INGOs, because we believe the INGOs are one prominent actor in the global sector. So we're focusing more on the INGOs in this domain. And what we are doing is that we believe the prominent role of the INGOs, but then also we've also come to realize that the current model that the INGO is working in has not been and is no longer fit for purpose. So there is a need for us to reimagine how the INGO works in terms of the structure, their power, their positioning, and the role that they are playing in the entire global civil society work. So we are looking at in what ways can we work differently as international non-governmental organization. That's why the name is Reimagining INGOs, because the focus is to look at the INGOs. How do we reimagine our role, our position, our structure, our models and ways of working? So the first phase, I keep talking about the first phase that we came up with some innovations. So we started with the first 2 years and we were looking at different options, different solutions, different innovative ways that we can propose to the INGO sector for that equitable, balanced system that we want, for that power to be shifted. So we had about 6 different innovations that include participatory grant making models. It includes issues around language. How do we use language in the development sector? It includes issues on how do we untie the aid sector, so that the funding and aid can go directly to local national organizations who are championing and leading a lot of effort in development work that we are doing. It includes the work that ADESO is doing on the pledge, where INGOs have signed on and have identified some issues that they've pledged that they would like to change the way that they are doing. And it includes issues on risks and accountability, difficult conversation around risks, and how do we navigate risks when we want to shift power to local national organization. And all these innovations have been hosted by different organizations. So WACSI is hosting the Decolonizing Advisory Community. We have NORSAC and Transform Trade hosting grant making. We have the Uganda National Governance Forum, Uganda hosting the language innovation. ADESO is leading on the Pledge for Change. The ICSC is also leading on the risks and accountability, and the Global Fund for Community Foundation is leading on it. So we have a lot of global allies working with RINGO and a huge community of friends, families, communities, allies of RINGO who are supporting us to champion this initiative. So that's what we've been doing for the last 2 years. But recently, as we move to second phase, what we are doing now from last year is that with the innovation in place, there is one critical aspect that we have to look at, that is looking at the influencers in the sector. So the current phase of RINGO is more of focusing on influencing the influencers. That's how we call it. So we are actually looking at the INGO boards who are very instrumental in making decisions regarding policies and practices of the INGO sector. And we're also looking at the funder community, both the private foundation, the bilaterals, that are also very keen in terms of the work that the sector does. So we've created action pod, these separate groups. So we have an action pod for INGO boards, an action pod for funders. That is more of a peer learning space, bring board members together to navigate through what are the difficult issues that we are struggling with at the board level. What are the things that we need to change at the board level? In terms of the funders, what are the things we are struggling with? What are the things we need to change? How do we change it? What are the options? What are the strategies? And the idea is that at the end of this phase, we are hoping that we get board members and some of the funders change some policies and some of the practices that govern the work of the INGOs at large. So that is what we are currently doing in the second phase of RINGO, and it's becoming very interesting.
Next question, where can I sign up? Go for it, Kate.
Yeah, it's very interesting. I was just wondering if I could pitch in Nompilo and Nancy, because this all sounds so interesting. And I was just wondering two things, really. One is whether WACSI has heard of the work that Interact are doing to decolonize international consultancy, because it sounds as though you're almost working on two sides of the same coin. So that's one thing in terms of, are you collaborating on this? And the other thing is, I'm quite sure that our listeners are going to want to follow up on the many different avenues that you've identified here. And I just want to remind our listeners and viewers at this point that they should have a look at the show notes below this episode, because we're going to make sure that the show notes point people in all the many directions that you've just raised. But just going back to the question about Interact and rethinking international consultancy, could you just outline the relationship that you have with Interact, or if you have one?
Yes, we do have a close relationship with Interact. I think Interact and WACSI's work are always hand in hand, so we collaborate a lot on many fronts. And Interact is a key supporter of the Decolonizing Advisory Community platform, including ADESO, because ADESO has a consultancy work on decolonizing advisory services that is also collaborating with us to create community. So we are not working in isolation, we are all working together. So Interact, ADESO, WACSI, Peace Direct, and other key actors in the sector are co-working with us in creating this platform. And we are also working with Interact in different angles in relation to the work on consultancy services and engaging with how do we work with consultants to facilitate shared learning. Most of our work is closely connected, so we engage a lot with Interact.
Thank you so much. Back to you, Nompilo.
Yeah, this is actually amazing. And I'm really pleased to see just the collaborative and global networks that WACSI is part of, and believe it will actually be very impactful work. I was intrigued by the INGO pledge, and I'm going to follow up on that to see how it catches traction over time. And really, really like that focus on policy in your phase 2 just also means that at this point, not only are we reimagining INGOs, we also start giving ideas that can also influence policy, because then it also sets a longer term trend for change in the future. That's wonderful. My last question, Nancy, thank you for sharing your ideas with us today. As we close, can you identify a practical step that our listeners and viewers can take to support decolonization and shifting power, whether they are members of the engaged general public or work in the development sector?
Okay, so I will share just three things, 3 ideas. So the first one is that we are inviting all Southern actors. If you are anywhere in the global South and you have lived in this sector, you've worked in this sector, you are working with local national organization or in social movements, and you have a wealth of experience available to support, drive the decolonization agenda, we are inviting you to join the community. That's the Decolonising Advisory Community, because that is a space for you to really use your knowledge, your expertise to really impact organizations and make transformation happen. So we are inviting you to join that community. So that's my first idea. The second thing is also to INGOs, to funders, to organizations who are in the sector, who are now starting the journey to work on the way that they can decolonize their work, to know that knowledge and capacity do not only lie in the North. We are now finding different ways to dismantling where knowledge sits, where capacity is, who give knowledge, who give capacity. So there is a wealth of knowledge, experience, and capacity in the South that we need to all co-embrace to work together. So we should open up. That's what I would like to say. We should open up. We shouldn't be restricted. We should trust and identify and find, and with a lot of knowledge, expertise, and experiences that the Global South has to offer INGOs, funders, as we journey to shift the power and also decolonize our work. And lastly, I'm also a researcher, so I will not really say anything without talking about documenting knowledge and sharing our knowledge, because it's very important. Most of the times, we have a lot of knowledge, we have a lot of experiences, and we are not sharing. The work on decolonizing is a journey. It's not going to be fixed today, tomorrow, next year, or in the next 3 years. But then we can facilitate that long-term impact if we keep on documenting the different innovations, the different indigenous ways, the different practices that is available and it works, that people can use to also start changing the way that they work. So I will really advocate for us to put a lot of energy and emphasis on documenting our experiences, documenting our knowledge, documenting all the things that we know are in the sector, in your organization. If you've tested a model and it's working well, it's the opportunity for you to capture these and document and share so that we have a repository of something to build on, to learn from, and also to shift power across the Global South. Thank you.
What does one say after that? The enthusiasm is infectious and it's the inspiring work. Kate, do you have anything to say to close us off?
No, I would just like to thank Nancy and thank WACSI for the work that they're doing. I think this is great. And as Nompilo has already said, what I find particularly encouraging is that you're building alliance and you're building connections and you're creating a platform for not just Southern activists, but professionals who are wanting to take forward the Shift the Power movement into practical ways of supporting the decolonisation process. And you're looking at really practical ways of supporting others to shift their practice. So I'm very interested in what you're doing, and I'm going to make sure that the show notes for this episode signpost people very clearly so that they can follow up on the practical steps that you and WACSI are doing. So I'd just like to thank you for your work.
Thank you so much for this platform to be able to share. It's very important. And I think once we're able to connect with different spaces like this to share, we're able to send a message far and get more people, more collaborators, more alliance to work with us. Because sometimes you may be working with a lot of alliance, but there are others that are also there that could be attracted by some platforms like this and a podcast like this. So thank you, Development Hub, for setting this up. It's a very beautiful space, a very educative space, and I love the wealth of knowledge that you are documenting through this podcast to support the work that we are doing in the development sector.
Thank you so much. And I'd encourage our listeners and viewers to have a look at our online resources as well, because with every person who we speak to, we get their recommended readings and we're pulling them together as a resource list. So do take a look at that if you haven't done already. So thanks again, Nancy, and thank you for joining me as co-host Nompilo, and bye for now.
Take care. Bye.